Back in 2017, I described my following guest as having the best haircut at the Inbound conference in Boston. If you've been in the world for digital for more than a couple of years, you've heard about Rand Fishkin. He's the founder of Moz, an SEO tool and community he ran until 2018. And for the past 2 years, he's been at the helm of Spark Toro, an audience intelligence tool, which we'll talk about later. Rand, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Moby.
Awesome. You didn't know I was going to throw that one at you, did you? But as a person who also likes taking care of his hair, you need to know that there are other people who appreciate it when you do put in the effort.
It's tough right now. My wife Geraldine just gave me a haircut yesterday, and she's learning. She's doing the best she can. I think it's solid.
That is so funny you say that. I usually go get my hair cut as well, and my last 2 haircuts I've gotten my wife to do fades, right? I'm also a fan of the fade.
Exactly.
And she did pretty well. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you got a fade from your wife.
Yeah. It's not quite perfect everywhere, but hey, I mean, we're in quarantine. She's doing amazing work. I tried to give her a fade on the back of her. She's got kind of an undercut in the back, and I didn't do a perfect job either. So we just do the best we can.
That's awesome. Everyone's going through the same thing, but there you go. Rand, there's usually for any of our listeners, we like to start with strategy. We go into tactics and then we go personal. But if you don't mind, I'd love to share with you the most profound impact you had on me as a young marketer first up. Look, and this was it was where I kind of, gave you the title of the best haircut at Inbound back in, I think it was 2018, actually, not 2017. And you were speaking about, I didn't even know how you linked it. You were actually talking about, being yourself. This may ring any bells. You're talking about, I've got some notes here, as a heterosexual, self-confessed, effeminate boy growing up who played with Barbie dolls, who's the world to tell him he's strange or different? And man, that really resonated with me because, I mean, not that, I played with Barbie dolls or anything, but, and there's nothing wrong with that if you did.
Yeah,
but I felt different too. Like I grew up in a very kind of, low-key sort of masculine type of place where I kind of felt out of place. And then it's funny, that almost carried over in my adulthood where, people call it now imposter syndrome, right? Yeah. Where I'm like, look, I have to be a certain way, like I remember reading this book, which I regret reading in my early corporate career, how you had to be a D head to get ahead. And I thought, man, I got to be, I guess so. I gave it a go and it didn't work for me. So watching that at the time, and you have to understand, Rand, that's of all the things I've followed you for a long time, that's one thing that stuck with me. Being yourself, being not necessarily vulnerable, but just being comfortable in your own skin. So I just wanted to share that with you first up, and thank you for that.
Oh, thanks, man. No, that means a ton. I'm always surprised to find different things resonate with different people, but that, that means a lot more to me than, hey, I learned how to, increase my Google ranking by a little bit. Like, I'm happy to help folks on that front too, right? And I'm glad that I've been able to do that work with Moz. But certainly, I think that being able to be vulnerable, being able to be who we want to be, yeah, that means a huge amount.
Awesome. I got that out of and now I can sort of relax and stop fangirling a little bit and get into it. So thank you for that. Look, speaking of, the whole, we touched on it a little bit earlier. We're all going through the same thing. We're all getting our haircuts cut by our partners and whatnot. I sort of want to start high level, sort of high strategy. What are you finding right now that marketers are doing right? The businesses and brands that are pivoting either from a messaging point of view, positioning point of view, product point of view, marketing. What do you find that marketers are doing right now?
Yeah, I think that on all of those vectors, the answer is a little bit different, right? So on positioning, certainly one of the things that's working well in the B2B world that historically did not was our product will help save you money versus our product will help you get growth, right? So classic B2B positioning is don't save people money, help them get growth. Except when it's an economic recession or depression, in which case save people money, right? And so that switch is a pretty obvious one. On the product front, I think folks who are shifting up their product's features or roadmap or how their product can be applied to individuals and businesses that still have resources, that is making a big difference, right? So essentially, there's a huge swath of the economic pie, everything from energy sector to travel and lodging and hospitality to events and sports and 100 others that are way down. And then there's some, right, there's sort of like B2B software, well, hit and miss here or there, marketing and advertising down, but not universally down, and some sectors that are sort of rising, e-commerce, obviously, groceries, food delivery, recipes, all that, gardening, home improvement projects, right? And so essentially those products that are taking advantage of recognizing where people's shifting demand is happening and then serving those shifting demands effectively, that's making a big difference. And this is just, it's basically just shrinking the time frame for a lot of this, right? Anybody who's built a product or done marketing knows that this is what you have to do. You go figure out what your audience needs, what your customers' needs are, you go serve those needs. And the pandemic has basically just concentrated, decades worth of change into a few months, right? Everyone in the world is changing all of a sudden. And so we all have to reset our product, our positioning, our marketing channels and tactics, our pricing.
It's the best time to do it, right? Habits are in flux right now. So a necessity breeding innovation is certainly true.
I don't know if it's the best time to do it, but it's absolutely essential that you do it, right? We've done this with Spark Toro. We essentially started our launch at the end of February and had very good results with our initial early access groups. And then into March, we started sending more of those, and we're seeing, conversion rates are falling, engagement rates are falling, right? Everybody's just completely consumed by the pandemic news and shift to working at home and all that kind of stuff. And so we switched our strategy from, hey, let's try and launch with as many paid customers as we can and push people toward the paid package, to let's make the free package more generous and get more people using the product for free and getting value from it. And then in the future, right, we have some money in the bank from our investment. We have some time that we can spend. So let's try and make it such that if things start to recover in 6 to 9 months, we're there for that upswing, rather than trying to convince the few people who have dollars right now to spend right now.
Yeah, fair call. It's all about the pivot, 100%.
So I think a lot of marketers are getting value out of investing in future demand right now.
Mm-hmm. And just getting that mind share right now. Absolutely.
Exactly.
I wonder if this sort of ties into your marketing or comms plans for Spark Toro, but I talk a lot about hub and spoke content. In marketing, everyone has the same thing in a slightly different way, but just for those who don't follow it in those terms, but the idea of having one thing you do really, really well and then cutting it up into spokes. So for example, and that's not just sharing your podcast, a link on YouTube and sharing the link, that's repurposing. So for example, if I have this podcast, I may cut up a few carousel slide images for Instagram. I may take some snippets from you, Rand. I may put it in an email, may put an article. So as an outside observer, and I don't know this to be true, but as an outside observer, I feel like Whiteboard Fridays, and for anyone who hadn't watched Whiteboard Fridays in your Moz days, it's where every Friday you have a whiteboard in the bag, and you really were the pioneer of, here's a whiteboard, and I'm going to share a visual strategy. Or
I've got one in my home office. I don't know if you can see over there.
Oh, nice. And I saw you brought back the strategy for Spark Toro as well, by the way. Yeah, which I think is awesome, right? But as an outsider, I sort of felt, if I was observing, that perhaps that was your hub and spoke type of strategy. And I just want to ask you, what was the strategy, including things like the focus, the frequency? Could that be replicated today? And are you doing that for Spark Toro? If you can if that makes sense.
The answer is yes-ish. So the way that I think about this strategy is, I think twofold, right? One is a hub and spoke in the idea that you have a core strength, something that you're really good at, and you leverage that across multiple platforms in multiple ways. But I think the other component piece that's really important to me, and I think should be really important to every marketer, every brand, is a a way that you can scale that process with decreasing friction, right? To essentially build a flywheel. So example, right? Let's say that your flywheel was like mine at Moz, which was essentially built on the back of blog content. And Whiteboard Friday is essentially a spoke off of the hub of the Moz blogs content, right? I was blogging every night, 5 nights a week for whatever, 5 years, and then eventually expanded that into video and other things as well. But the flywheel of it was, figure out some things, have good intuition about what is going to do well in the industry, what's going to help a lot of people, both be useful to them and help them amplify it, right? Help people go share this thing. Produce that piece of content, that's sort of the base of the flywheel, amplify it across the channels that we have, email, social networks, ping other people about it to get them to share. And then as that gets amplified, your email list grows, more people subscribe to it, more people follow you on the social networks, hopefully, right? And you earn links and traction with Google, which helps you rank better. So you've essentially made it such that next time you publish content, it's a little bit easier, right? And every piece of content you publish thereafter has a little more chance of reaching more and more people. And that's essentially the kind of flywheel model that we built at Moz. And I would do it again. I am doing it again at Spark Toro, but with a little bit of a different bent. Most of the focus with Spark Toro, instead of being on purely content, is much more about free tools. So the free Spark Toro tool and a couple of free ancillary tools, the trending product, which has sort of marketing news, the fake followers analysis, the Spark score, so that kind of stuff.
Yeah, awesome. And you're still, wow, I didn't know you were blogging every night. And I think one of those things that maybe Spark.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
Not anymore, thank God. But back in my early days, yeah. Like every night I was just trying to, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. That was like prime blogging hour.
Not to go too hard into the whole hustle culture, right? But I think one thing I don't want to lose there is, maybe not for kind of bigger brand marketers that sit in, brand teams and whatnot, and maybe not for them. But I think one thing I don't want to lose there is, as a sort of startup, you kind of have to do that, right? You kind of have to eat that grit for a little while. Like you have to, you know what I mean? Like if it's not every night, but you got to punch it for a little while, don't you?
I certainly see value and have that recommendation that, if you have time and energy to concentrate on something and get good at it by repeatedly investing in it, that is really useful. What I will say about my own blogging was I foolishly was very, very tactical about it. It took me a long time to learn the skill of figure out what works and doesn't work and invest in the things that do work rather than the things that don't, and invest in getting better at it rather than just doing it. So I would say, I would guess that most people should not, work whatever 60 or 80 hours a week and keep focusing on like, oh, I just got to create this content and put it out there. You can be way, way smarter and do what I did in 20 hours a week in 2 hours a week. That would be my advice. I think working smarter, not harder, is a really, really good skill. And in fact, I probably, during that time frame, I don't think I was getting enough sleep, and that probably made my content worse, and it made my thinking worse, and it made my stress higher, which also made my thinking worse, right? So I think I got caught up in the hustle culture myself and was actually less successful than I would have been if I had sort of taken a step back and maybe watched a little more TV and gone to sleep earlier and, gotten healthy exercise and those kinds of things.
So just quickly, Randy, saying tactically that, maybe it would have been better, to do slightly less, but be more strategic about the content.
I probably should have been, instead of producing 5 posts a week, I probably should have been doing one really useful or good one.
Yeah, fair enough.
I think I was obsessed with quantity I was obsessed with, the hustle of like putting in the work and,
Putting the
um,
numbers, yeah.
yeah.
I did that with the podcast for 2 years religiously. I was doing it every week to the point where I was in Bali with my wife. She was asleep 2 o'clock in the morning. I was in a corner in a bathtub recording it because it had the best acoustics. And yeah, I was doing the same thing, hitting the numbers. Whereas if I just stopped, was a bit more strategic about it. Yeah, I follow you there. Okay, that makes a lot
And
of sense.
I mean, weirdly enough, right? All the research shows that this is true. If you take someone who's, been studying for a test and you give them whatever, a week off of just piecing out and stress relief, they tend to do better than the people who hunker down and cram for that last week, right? I think like popular culture and sort of this business hustle culture biases our thinking to believe that human beings' minds work one way when in fact we work a very different way, right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, Moby, where you're like, oh, I go on vacation and I come back to a full inbox and like a big to-do list, and you just boom, pound through it. You're like, oh my God, how did I get all that done in like 1 or 2 days coming back from vacation? It's because vacation made you more productive,
Mm,
right? That
absolutely right.
off time actually makes you a more productive person. I can feel it all the time, right? Like once you start to identify it in yourself, you can feel it where you go into a day and you're like, man, everything is just a slog. I can barely get through my inbox. Usually it doesn't take me so long. You know what? I need to just call it a day at 2 p.m. and go do other fun stuff. And then tomorrow pick it up again. And oh, look at that. I'm through the whole thing in 2 hours.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Rand. Like my problem has been I'm good at telling other people to do that. Like as a leader, you're like, hey, like there's someone who's listening and she'll get a big kick out of this. Her name's Tasha. She works hard. And I tell her, look, you need to take that break. Whether I'm saying this selflessly or selflessly, it's better for you. Selfishly, as an employer, you're going to be more productive. But
Right?
you have
Yes.
to like push yourself to do it for yourself. It's often easier to tell others.
Yep.
But yeah, good advice. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Um, it's funny. I was watching a lot of, just in the prep for this interview, I was watching a lot of your stuff, and I'm like, you know what? Randy's kind of like the Robin Hood of marketing, right? And I'll explain why. Because like, one thing I really like about you, there's a couple of people I really follow. You're definitely, one of those top guys who I follow. You talk about you're not scared to call people out. You're not scared to call networks out and Google and I wonder if you get any flack for that from those guys. But anyway, you're not scared to call them out. And you've spoken about. I love how you sort of said, you've kind of, it was easier at your time and you don't want to sort of pull the ladder up behind you. I really sort of like that.
Yeah.
And late last year, I referenced you in one of my podcast episodes. You were talking about things like, Google has taken, I think you said 50% of all traffic now results in 0 clicks. I guess, I mean, not necessarily that this isn't some SEO advice, but, what high level SEO advice would you give to people, or just awareness people? Because it is so much harder to actually get awareness and traction these days.
Yeah.
How do young brands or companies that have been around for a while but only now need to get that awareness, how do they sort of circumvent those problems?
So my recommendation is that you really concentrate on three things. One is building up your email list. So email is one of the few things that in web marketing you get to own and control independent of any network, right? We've all seen the stats. Facebook, whatever it was, 8 years ago, the average Facebook page post reached 4 or 5% of an audience, of a page's audience, and marketers were up in arms about this. Like, how dare you, Facebook? You're only showing it to 4 or 5%. Today, that number is 0.08%. People aren't complaining as much, but they should be, right? They should be infuriated. Why did I ever bother building up my Facebook page likes? Telling people to like you on Facebook is basically saying to 1,000 people who are interested in your brand, I'll take one of you. Right? It's just mind-boggling. So I would focus on building up your email list, because that gives you the ability to continuously communicate, stay in touch with people who care about what you are doing. The second thing I would invest in is content that exists first and foremost on your site, and every other network drives that content that drives visitors back to it. So for example, if I were posting multimedia stuff, right? I strongly recommend that you take your embedded PowerPoint or SlideShare from your webinars and whatnot, and you put those on your website, and you put the recorded version on your website. And then maybe you have the YouTube version that goes up 90 days later. But everybody, you tell everyone in your channel, if you want to get this stuff first, you got to come to our site, right? Our website is the place to come sign up for this. You put that video teaser on LinkedIn, you put the video teaser on Twitter, you put the video teaser on Facebook, you put the snippet of that video on Instagram. All of those channels should drive back to your website. So email, website, and then I think the third thing to recognize, especially with search engines and SEO, is that you need to be doing essentially thoughtful keyword research and keyword targeting. But what I mean by thoughtful is aware of what the search results look like and how they do or don't drive traffic. So the classic SEO was like, find the highest volume keywords that match your searcher's intent, go try to rank for those. And I think you have to add in a layer of what does the search results look like, and if I rank number one, would I actually get traffic to this query? Because if I can't, I should go after lower searched for terms that Google doesn't try and cannibalize. And so that's sort of a using click-through rate, estimating click-through rate, ad competition from featured snippets, competition from all the rich snippets that Google puts in their results. That stuff is really important too.
I love it. And I love how your answer, especially the first part of that, it wasn't like a traditionally sexy one. Like I'm huge on TikTok right now. It wasn't like, and it's the only channel that I've actually done really well on, but it wasn't like go on TikTok or do this or do that. It's like, hey, basics, man, like build that email list.
I am really nervous about people who build their brand on someone else's land. So, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube. So dangerous. Like, I can't tell you how many people I have talked to who are like, oh, back in this year or these years, I had so much play on network X. And then what happened? Well, competition happened and the network lowered my visibility, and people stopped using that network for that thing as much, and they got tired of my stuff. Whereas if you build it on your website, it never stops. You control it.
Awesome. I'm going to use that as a reminder to get people to see the show notes. And if you want to see the video version of this and Rand's awesome glasses and his little figurines there, I got some of my own figurines too. Then head over to redpandas.com.au/EP109, EP109. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about Spark Toro now. And I remember when you first started, firstly, when you left Moz, I was like, oh, he's leaving Moz. But then, what you started talking about was really, really exciting. And it was almost too good to be true. And I'm glad to sort of say that almost too good to be true thing is now live. And you were talking about, look, imagine knowing about like taking a persona or avatar, or whoever you sort of, want to call them, label them, and putting them into a search engine and finding out about them. And it's something that's plagued marketers for a long time. I think part of your problem, Rand, is going to be with Spark Toro. It almost like sounds too good to be true, which is awesome why you have this free version that people can sort of play with. So in your own words, talk about Spark Toro, the problem that you guys found that you had to solve and what it solves today.
Sure. Yeah. So I think our big, the big challenge that so many marketers face, especially if you don't have massive budget of millions of dollars and a dev team to help you and, funds to throw at market research companies, is that you want to understand your audience's behavior online, right? If you don't want to just throw money at Google and Facebook and let them sort out the targeting and face, direct competition, if you want to go directly to the podcasts that your audience listen to and the web and the YouTube channels that they watch and the websites that they visit and the social accounts that they follow, and build direct relationships of any kind for co-marketing, for advertising, for sponsorship, for, I want to pitch to write a guest contribution. I want to pitch to be a guest on your show. I want to, whatever, every type of creative marketing, the ones that usually have the highest ROI. The ones that are the ones that don't have to go through the direct channels, right? You don't have to do the pay YouTube to be in that YouTube video or be in the pre-roll ad or whatever. And finding those is ludicrously hard. I think a ton of the reason that marketing ecosystem doesn't exist is because you can't figure out where your audience pays attention, right? The other problem that we were really existing to solve is, have you ever had this where you, I don't know if you worked agency side for a while, but like a lot of agencies experience this, and a lot of in-house teams too, where you go into the boardroom or you go into meeting room, and the CMO or the CEO or whatever is like, I want to get us in the Wall Street Journal. Our customers read the Wall Street Journal. And you look at them and you're like, no, they don't. I'm pretty sure they don't. In fact, I'm pretty sure the only reason you're saying that is because you read the Wall Street Journal and your buddies at the golf course read the Wall Street Journal. And so you're assuming, you're making these assumptions, but you can't bring data to that, right? You don't have oh, well, look, we went and looked at everything your customers follow on all the social networks and what they share on their websites. And we discovered that the Wall Street Journal is only followed or engaged with by 2% of them. And here's these 20 publications that are engaged with more than that. We wanted to solve that problem too. So that's exactly what Spark Toro does. If you can describe an audience, right, what they talk about, what they put in their bio, what their job title is, what hashtags they use on social media, what they already follow or a website they already visit and engage with, we can give you data about where you can reach them and in what percentage.
Yeah, and we are agency, by the way, Rand. And for us, and for any other agency folks listening out there, a lot of our kind of remit is to identify personas, avatars, and then come up with media plans and where you should, target them. So, I mean, it's like a no-brainer for us. But Rand, I think you have an example to share. I mean, for the folks watching the video, if you sort of want to get that ready, fire that up. But
yeah, let's do it.
I think it's best if you maybe show an example, and maybe if you can kind of work on an application as well, like so how someone would sort of apply this. So yeah, I can see a screen now. I think we're recording. So go ahead, Rand. I can see
sure. Yeah. So let's imagine for a second that the people that we want to reach, we have maybe we have a product for security researchers, right? And folks who are in the digital security and cybersecurity space, which is a big space right now and continually grow. So Spark Toro has this idea that you can search in these 5 different ways, right? My audience frequently talks about, and let's just try that one to start, cybersecurity. Oh, my microphone and keyboard slightly out of whack. Okay. So when we perform a search, what Spark Toro is not going to do is go list people who talk about cybersecurity. That's not how it works. Spark Toro works by searching for profiles that talk about cybersecurity and then showing you the aggregate behavior that those accounts have, right? So 86,000 sources in our database frequently talk about cybersecurity. What we mean by that is they post on whatever, their Twitter, their LinkedIn, their public Facebook, their Instagram, their Reddit, what have you, or their about page of their website about cybersecurity several times in the last 120-ish days. And so of those 86,000 sources who frequently talk about cybersecurity, this is a very large audience. Their behavior is pretty homogeneous, meaning very similar to each other. And so we have high confidence that the audience data we're presenting is correct. I don't know the cybersecurity space at all. In fact, I probably should have performed this search before I did it with you, Moby, but I'm doing it for the first time anyway, because what the heck. So we can say, okay, almost half, 43,766 of these 86,000 profiles follow, share, or engage with Brian Krebs on one or more of his social networks. There you go, right? If you're a cybersecurity person, you might say, oh, well, how big is Brian Krebs really in the cybersecurity space? Real big. I've never heard of Dark Reading or Info Security Mag, but they are also huge, right? So, and I can go click through and then see a list of the sources, the Hacker News, Threat Post, Security Week, SC Media, Black Hat, SANS Institute, DEF CON, right? I know a couple of these brands, but I don't know a lot of them. But now you have a sense of like, oh, wait a minute, these are followed by trailing down from 51% all the way to 40%, 39%, 35%. So huge portions of these audience follow these social accounts. And we can do the same thing with websites, seeing, right, a list of which websites are visited and engaged with. So same thing with podcasts, right? Same thing with, I haven't heard of Smashing Security or RSA Radio, but they're huge with these audiences. And podcast sponsorship is very inexpensive right now, as I'm sure you're aware, right? So
Untapped.
If I were trying to reach the cybersecurity world with my new software product, my new hardware product, my new media outlet, bam, this is exactly where I'd go. If I were a podcaster or a YouTuber in the security space, these are the people I would invite, right? If I were looking for advertising sponsorship or co-marketing or doing an event together or putting together a webinar, this is who I do it with, right? And so we can sort of answer these core questions in a really data-driven way, right? Showing all of these sources. And then we have this final tab called Audience Insights, which shows a bunch of text behavior and geography-based data. So we know that people who frequently talk about cybersecurity also often in their bio have words like data, privacy, cloud, IoT, InfoSec, information security, speaker, blockchain analyst, right? So all these kinds of words. And now you get a sense for like, oh, hang on, I could take that data to Facebook audience and say, find me people with InfoSec in their profile. I want to advertise to them. Find me people with CISSP. I don't actually even know what that is, but a substantive percentage of people in the cybersecurity world have that in their profile, right? And I can see, right, geographic distributions where it's heaviest and lightest. There you go.
And of course, you can, if you can cut that up as well. So obviously on your screen, I can see 80% of those are in the US, blah, blah, blah. But I could run that filter just for Australia as well.
You could, absolutely.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, so you could say, I only want people who talk about cybersecurity in Australia and do that search. And now it'll probably be much, much smaller, a few hundred, few thousand. Our Australia profile database is much smaller than our US one generally. But then, okay, 1,000 sources in Australia, not bad.
It's not bad.
And then you can see what is unique about this group and where they are geographically: Sydney, Melbourne, Newcastle, Brisbane, Canberra, no surprise, and what content they share and which. So this AUSPOL hashtag.
Yeah, OzPol.
OzPol. Is that a politics thing, or is that a
I'm pretty sure it's a politics thing. Again, I could be wrong as well. There's those two things, politics and cybersecurity. I'm not big fans of, but I'm pretty sure it's a politics thing. But this is really, really interesting too. The other thing too that I can see on my screen is the most active networks. And when you did it for the world, LinkedIn was the most active network. For this one, it's Facebook followed by LinkedIn as well. The other thing too, we talk about as marketers all the time, speak to your persona in their language. You know what I mean? Like, don't talk down to them or up to them, that sort of thing. And on this screen as well, the audience insights, I can see the frequently used phrases and words in their shares in their content. So just naturally, if we're using, network and access versus, I don't know, groups and, entry, for example, then that's going to resonate with them a little bit more. So I love it. It's very easy to use, very kind of what you see, what you get, visual. And whether you're a brand marketer or an agency or whatever, it's very graphic as well. There's a lot of, obviously, for the folks just listening, you can't see the pie charts and all the, kind of little graphics, but it's very visual. It's really, really nice.
We wanted to make it something that is just incredibly easy to understand, right? The first time you see it, you're like, oh, right. 47% or whatever, 50% of people who talk about cybersecurity regularly online follow Brian Krebs. I don't know who that is personally,
or Brian K. Ribs, whatever.
Right. But that is an incredibly important person. And we have this concept too, that, if you want to, for example, look at people who frequently talk about cybersecurity versus people who use InfoSec in their bio, right, in their job title, and see the differences and similarities between those folks, you could, right, compare one versus another and see the overlap visually and numbers wise. So, okay, there's 86,000 accounts that frequently talk about cybersecurity, 7,000 that talk about InfoSec, and the overlap is about 2,300, right? And then I can see the distinctive data between the two of them and the overlap in data between the two of them, right? So distinctively, that cybersecurity group was following Brian Krebs a lot, but Cisco security actually does better in the overlap, right? So if I'm targeting people who both talk about cybersecurity and have InfoSec in their profile, this Cisco account, this Hayden 33K, Iron Geek, Security Humor, ATTRC, those might be accounts to go after instead, right? I can see websites that are visited, including dhs.gov here in the US, MIT, IT Pro Day, all that kind of stuff. So it just gives you like a depth of data in seconds that would take you, what would it take you to get this data otherwise? Like, what do you have to do? Build your own crawler to go visit all the social and web profiles of everyone in your audience and then try and extract that information? It's just an incredible pain in the butt. And there are companies that do it, but it's ludicrous as opposed to, you can do this for free, right? You can do this for free on Spark Toro, get this data. And if you're like, man, I am using this all the time, great, awesome. Then you can sign up for a paid account. But like we said, we're really trying to help folks do this for free and get value from that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. I think that's a really good, really good overview of what the tool can do. And yeah, I mean, I've played with it a lot. I didn't do the compare audiences. So even as you're just talking, I was like, oh, I'm going to get HubSpot and marketers and look at the overlap.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. Really like that.
Yeah, if you find sort of two brands that are competitive with one of your clients, for example, and you plug them in, you can see kind of the intersect and overlap. You can compare those, one of the competitor's brand to your client's brand and show them like, hey, here's the group they're reaching that we're not reaching. And then here's attributes about that audience and where we could go target them. So if we think, let's say we're competing with whatever, Eloqua and HubSpot are competing and HubSpot's trying to figure out who's Eloqua reaching that we're not reaching. Hey, let's go after that group, right? And where do we reach them? This is the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Rand, thank you so much for your time. I've only got a couple of quick questions, if that's okay. One of them is around, and I can see there behind you, the Lost and Founder book that you have there.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, because I'm not going to lie, I remember when you announced it, and I'm like, oh, I better get that. And I didn't. So I'm going to go get that now. But I've kind of, read the quick sort of summary, but why don't you sort of tell folks about what that book is and the lessons you've shared in that book?
Yeah, so I have a lot of conversations with with folks like yourself, founders and entrepreneurs, folks in marketing, and I kept finding that the same conversations would come up again and again. Things like what we talked about early on, right? About being vulnerable and being able to be yourself, and things like getting more sleep and less stress to be able to perform better work. Talking about hiring and scaling teams, talking about going through anxiety and depression in the context of the work world, raising capital or not. All those kinds of topics were things I could not have enough coffees with enough people, right? and so Lost and Founder is really a way to try and take 17 years of mostly doing dumb shit and scale the lessons from that for other entrepreneurs and founders and marketers and builders, so that, look, we're all going to make mistakes, but you don't have to make exactly the ones I made. And my sense is that if you can, if the stories in there or the research or the combination of those two things can resonate with you and prevent you from falling down those same pits that I did, that would be a wonderful thing.
If you were going to add an amendment to it and you were writing that during COVID, Would you add anything different, or do you think those lessons are enduring enough?
Hmm. I think the one thing that I wrote about in Lost and Founder that seems much less applicable in the pandemic, in the context of the pandemic, is I had a whole chapter on beware the pivot, right? Beware of pivoting your business or just assuming that in many cases, a lot of early stage companies, a lot of early stage teams do this. They launch and they're sort of like, look, it doesn't really matter whether our product is right or our market is right. If it's not right, we'll figure it out and we'll pivot. And what is, I think, underappreciated is how difficult it is to change direction, how difficult it is to change your positioning, your product, your target market, how much work you lose when you do that, and how much time it takes. But I think in the context of the pandemic, look, almost everyone has to pivot very quickly to make it through. And I wish I had provided more tools and resources for people thinking about how can I pivot in a way that is low enough effort and high enough confidence to give myself the time and the security to be able to get through a really challenging period like what we have now.
Awesome. And final question, Rand, you've spoken about focus wins. And I think you've touched on it a little bit earlier. It's a marathon. Can you talk to that really quickly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, just broadly speaking, I learned my lesson that trying to do lots of things simultaneously is a recipe for disaster. And, this is one of the reasons Spark Toro is so incredibly focused on just one thing, just providing this data, as opposed to trying to do 50 other things that potential customers might want. And so I am a big believer in specializing, identifying a need, and then relentlessly becoming best in the world at that. There are so few examples of companies, especially early stage companies, who've ever done two things well. Just two. Do one thing well. Do that first. That's my advice.
Awesome. Rand, thank you so much for your time. I don't know how you do this. You must be in such demand by folks like myself. Thanks
No,
for...
Moby, this was an absolute pleasure. You are a great interviewer, my friend. Really, you are.
Thank you, Rand. That means a lot.
I can see why this podcast resonates. You just have like your voice, your style, your flow. It's great, man. You got something here.
I appreciate it, Rand. Thank you so much. Are you going to be at Inbound? Oh, I think they're pushing it back. But you're not scheduled to come to the next Inbound at all, are you?
I don't think I'm not scheduled to come to anything. My guess is summer 2021. I hope to be able to travel again. Like the US, this country is a nightmare right now. You don't want anyone from this country visiting anywhere.
I've been applying every year to speak, and I finally got in this year. And I'm speaking on TikTok, right? And
nice.
And then the pandemic happens. I'm like, man, but it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. I mean, I'd love to sort of once social distancing in mind and whatnot. I'd love to interview you again sometime. But thank you so much, Rand. We love what you're doing and keep doing what you're doing.
Likewise, man. Take care of yourself.